All right. I think I'm here. And while we just wait for some people to arrive and start logging in, I'm going to go ahead and play with this because I'm not familiar with this software. And so I'm hoping that it's going to work. So if you've got some kind of button that you can push, like an emoji or whatever, just let me know when you're here. And I do apologize for the noise in the background. I've got my little puppy here. Oh, I can see a little hand emoji. So you guys must have emojis. I've got my puppy here, and I have locked her in a crate about 10 minutes ago because I don't know where the best place for her is, because if she's out in the yard, she's likely to carry on barking and I'll have to go and get her. And I'm hoping that when she's in the crate, she'll eventually go to sleep. She's been in there about 15 minutes and she's not sleeping yet. But yeah, hopefully she'll go down in a minute. So, okay, I can actually see some names starting to pop up. So yeah, we'll just hang in there for a minute and I'll go ahead and get started pretty shortly. Everyone should be pretty much getting a notification to say that we're on in their email or whatever. Oh, here comes a thumbs up. That's cool. You guys have cool emojis. I don't have emojis. I've just got my own thumbs up, my own wave. So this is a really interesting case. I'm really looking forward to sharing it. And I'll give it moo, no, sit. She's wagging her tail at me. So I'm going to give it one more minute. It's just clicked over 7 o'clock on my phone now. So hopefully, that's when everyone's going to start logging in and then we'll get started. So I'm basically going to share with you the process of this horse. And I do have permission from the owner to reveal the horse's name, which I'm extremely grateful for. I have, as I said in my post, recently completed a trauma-informed trainer certificate. And as part of that certificate, I had to do a case study. And this is what, brought it all back for me because I actually had this horse in 2015 and he, I'll go through in the, no. I'll go through that in the when I start sharing my case study, all the information's there. But yeah, so 2015, it was 9 years ago. And for any reference, he's actually referenced in my book. He's referenced in my yellow book, this one. He's the horse that's called Lemonade in the back of that book. And so I've shared his story there and used alias, obviously. And when I did my case study, I used an alias, not at the request of the owner, just because that was a respectful thing for me to do. And then when I started talking about doing the webinar, she actually contacted me and I said, do you need anything? Do you need any photos or anything or any more information? So I got a refresher on sort of the history, which was fantastic. And I said, can I use his real name? And she said, yeah, no worries. First, I want to say or introduce myself for those of you who don't know. My name's Tanya Kraus, and I have a business called Tanya Kraus Horsemanship and another one called Holistic Equine Education. And I basically travel around doing, I'm a horsemanship practitioner. I take in horses for training. I teach clinics pretty much worldwide, and I've been doing that for 14 years or so now. I've had horses for most of my life. And as a horsemanship coach, we are typically, quite often, we get a reputation for troubled horses. And quite often, we are the last resort for people to go to when they feel like they're not getting anywhere with their existing coach. which doesn't need to be the case, because horsemanship practitioners are actually really talking about all the same stuff, like balance and confidence and self-carriage and all of the things that you need for any discipline. But yeah, we've got a bit of a reputation as troubleshooters, and so that's where a lot of my work has been based around. And young horses. I've got a real passion in colt starting and young horses. And so that's me. I'm not a veterinarian. I have dealt with a few horses. This is my only self-mutilation horse, but I did do a bit of research about self-mutilators when it first came to me. When he first came to me, I had no idea that it was a thing. So I did a bit of research then, and I actually got several comments. I think it was 3 comments on my post from people who had had self-mutilators as well, which was really interesting, their circumstances, which I'll share with you again. So I'm not a vet. This isn't a scientific study. It's just it's just the debrief of everything that happened with that horse as we know it, as we understand it. The other thing that's really important to note is that correlation doesn't always equal causation. And what that means is that you'll hear me refer to the horse going away. He was leased to somebody, and he was also sent away for halter training and show halter training. He's an Arabian, so show Arabian training. And I've been asked already on the post, well, how does that result in the horse self-mutilating? And I said it doesn't. I'm not saying that that was the case. I'm saying that those 2 things occurred, and that it was only after those 2 things happening that the horse started to demonstrate that behavior. Now, whether it was the training practices or simple environmental triggers that led this horse to do that, and the change of where he was, obviously something triggered him enough to begin self-mutilating. And a couple of people have said to me it's the worst case that they have seen. He, as you saw in the photos, he had pretty bad scarring. So let's get into it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, hopefully I'm going to share my screen now. And then I'm going to, let me just see if I can get this organized. I'm really sorry about that little girl. Okay. Okay. Sorry, everyone. I'm trying to, here we go. Excellent. Okay, so I'm hoping right now that you can see this slide, which sit. No. I'm hoping that you can see, and someone can just give me a thumbs up that they can actually see the slide. Thumbs up. Fantastic. And you can hear my audio. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, fantastic. Let's get going. Okay, so the case study is of this horse called the Catalyst. As I said, he is a purebred Arabian horse, and he was retained as a breeding stallion. So this is him in all of his stunning, beautiful glory, obviously before the self-mutilation started. This is him here again before the self-mutilation started. So this image was taken probably around 2 years old, and so he is a stallion then. And the history of this horse is that, so he was born in 2010. He was retained as a stallion. He had a straightforward birth, and the owner has described him as a great foal, engaging, happy, no problems, nothing untoward. At about 12 months old, he had a stifle injury which required surgery, but all went well in the recuperation of that. And in March 2012, so as a 2-year-old, he went on lease to someone who then sent him onto a trainer for halter training. Now, I believe that they did that in order to show him in hand. You can see that that first image that I showed you was him being shown in hand. And he also bred a few mares at this time. So this is probably anywhere between 2012 and 2014 this photo was taken, because he was away for 2 years. He came home in early 2014 and he was sent to me in 2015. So the first signs of the issues were evident before he came home, and it was played down to the owner and it was controlled with rugs. So my understanding is that it was sort of like, oh, you know, he does this thing where he kind of bites himself a little bit, but we're just using rugs and that seems to work. Nothing much to worry about. That's the indicator that I got from the owner. So he had already started the behavior and she was sort of told that it wasn't that bad and you could control it with rugs. And when he returned home in March 2014, the issues had increased, and she, to the state where she did consult with a vet, and that first vet suggested gelding the horse. Gelding the horse actually exacerbated the issue to extreme levels, to the photos that you guys saw on the Facebook post. And the second vet advised that this was common. So she got a second vet to, give an opinion on the horse, and he actually said, oh, gelding often does result in the horses, these self-mutilators, becoming worse. And that's really interesting because on my Facebook post, I had 3 people comment on the fact that they had horses that had done it before. 2 definitely, I'm pretty sure the third one was, they were all Arabians, they were all stallions, they were all gelded, and all 3 of those people said, oh, we gelded the horse and it came good, it was fine. And what's really interesting is that the research would indicate that gelding the horses can exacerbate the issue. And so this is the first step where we've got to look at correlation to causation, is that the people that have commented have believed that the gelding has improved the problem. And so, but the research would demonstrate that that's not the case. But what I'm going to say is what also happened at the time of gelding, all of those people also said that the horses were isolated because they were stallions. They were isolated. So one of them, I think, lived in a round pen for 2 years of its life. One of them was used as a teaser stallion. So that's a pretty stressful environment. And then I can't remember what the third one was, but similar circumstances were isolated. Now, all 3 of these people also said that once the horse was gelded, that they put them in a herd environment and they all started working with them and training them. So was it the gelding that helped, or was it the training that helped, or was it the fact that the horse was able to be in a better environment than being isolated and being alone? And I'm going to guess that it's probably a combination of all 3. So again, I'm not a vet. There's no evidence to support that, but I'm just saying that, similar circumstances, and obviously once the horses are gelded, you're able to then, put them in herd environments and things like that. So it's something to consider. So trauma in his history was evidence. Causes cannot be absolutely confirmed. So we do know that I don't even know where the horse went for training, what that environment's like, anything like that. I don't know what methods were used, but I do know that in some circumstances, I have been told about pretty horrendous situations in regards to the way horses can be halter trained. And often in those halter training circumstances where they want the horse to be expressive and have really a particular stance and a particular expression on their face and a particular movement, that there is some extreme methods that are applied in order to get the horses to do that. Coupled with the fact that the horse, I guess what I'm trying to say is that when he was a stallion and when he was at home, there was no issue there was no training in there as either. So then he gets sent away. So maybe that's the first little nail in the coffin, is that he's away from home. Maybe the second nail in the coffin is the training and the style of training that was done. Maybe the third nail in the coffin is that he was isolated, etc., etc., etc. Now, obviously, self-mutilation, we're talking about an extreme situation, an extreme trauma, and an extreme behavior as a result of that trauma. So I'm going to let you come to your own conclusions in regards to, you know, what potentially caused that to happen. So gender was a factor as well. Self-mutilation in horses is far more prevalent in stallions, and gelding, as I said earlier, can result in the behaviors worsening. And I just spoke about gelding. In some cases, gelding has appeared to help, and this could be that other changes made at the time. And I believe that that was the case with this horse, the Catalyst. Gelding him again allowed him to ultimately be in a herd environment, etc., etc., and, you know, be handled in his new home and stuff like that. He is a well-bred Arabian, and the breed is typically on the more elevated end of the scale. And as I said, that I have had 3 people comment about self-mutilators, and all of them were Arabians as well. So maybe something to consider there. So the behaviors that he specifically had when we talk about self-mutilation, he was biting his sides to the point of bleeding. He had multiple scars, so it was over a long period of time. He would actually latch onto himself and spin uncontrollably while he was doing it, sort of like a dog chasing their tail, and when they get a hold of their tail, they can't stop. That was what he was doing, but he actually had a hold of his own flesh. And he would also canter around the paddock while he was doing this, and he began to hit fences, run into other horses, and fall over in the paddock. So it was obviously super extreme behaviors and very unsafe. So by the time, let's talk about triggers. So by the time he got to me and I was observing him, it would seem that the episodes had become randomly triggered, not easily identified by me. And so what I mean by that is, and I'm going to go into how I did the observation with him. What I mean by that it wasn't easily identified is he could literally be eating grass in the arena where I had him housed, or he could be eating hay, and you would see him lift his head and he would look to his side at his shoulder or his flank, and he would just start. And so it really did come out of nowhere. Whereas the owner said the same thing. It would be seemingly random. He would be eating grass 1 minute and the next he would be spinning. Now, prior to it becoming random or habitual, if you like, the noted triggers that she had seen was maybe elevated horses. So he was born on a full-time breeding facility. So let's say you had horses calling out, or mares calling out to foals, or foals calling out, or stallions calling out, or whatever. He would get triggered then. Breeding behavior, so obviously the breeding action, but particularly the sounds that the stallions make and the mares and things like that, that would trigger him. But by the time he got to me, a horse would literally move from one side of, from one spot to another to eat grass, and he would seemingly just trigger off. So the approach that the owner did at home, she did try quite hard to help him at home before she sent him to me. So he was born on and returned to a full-time stud farm. So what I mean by that is, he was born on the stud farm, and then when he got sent away on lease, he was returned to that same place. And when he got sent to me for training, he came to me, and then he got returned to that place. So it was the same property. She hadn't sold or anything like that. Oh, that's better. So options to remove stresses for him were limited in regards to the environments where she could house him free of triggers. So being a full-time stud farm, she had stallions on site, she had mares on site, she had foals on site, she had breeding on site. So there was a lot of stuff that was happening there, and we were definitely hoping that he would be able to be returned and retained by her. She also consulted with a herbalist, a holistic medicine person. and he was put on a specialized diet, which we continued the whole time that he was with me. I can't remember exactly what it was. I probably have a copy of it somewhere. I do recall it had certain herbs, tinctures had been made for him. I do recall it was quite expensive. And the only reason I say that is because, you know, this owner tried really hard to do everything in her power to do right by this horse. And so, you know, she really did attempt, and it was a really expensive feeding regime. Now, something that I wanted to talk about here was the little asterisks there are to remind me to say what was interesting was that the herbalist in consult actually didn't want the horse to go away for training. The herbalist actually wanted him to stay, and he had lost weight, and so the herbalist wanted to get him into physical fitness before sending him away for training. And she also wanted him to be just on the tinctures and the herbs that she had prescribed for him before. She basically wanted the behavior to stop or resolve significantly before sending him to training. I've got copies of the emails and things like that. And she was sort of like, I feel like that's going to make him worse to send him away. And the owner still sent him to me on consult with me. I said, I disagree with that because the horse is at the apex of the extremeness of the behavior. And so I don't think that anything can make him worse because he's at the point where he is, he's going to injure himself to the extent where you're going to have to euthanize him because he's gone through a fence or broken a leg or something anyway. So we sort of, he was at the extreme level where we didn't really have time to wait. And I also really, I was really strong in my feeling that what this horse needed was the intervention of training. A diet wasn't going to be enough. So I am right up there on the nutrition side of things. I'm not saying that a diet wasn't needed. In fact, if I ever got sent a horse like this again, I would 100% go down the diet road. I think you've got to take a holistic approach, and we're going to talk about that later. But the reason I bring this up is because it was said, oh no, don't send him away. And I think that would have been a mistake at the time. So she did put him also in a larger paddock, so he was able to see other horses. I think at one stage he was in with a couple of brood mares, but he became dangerous towards them because, as I said, once he grabbed himself, he would just be uncontrollable. And not only were we worried about him hitting the other horses, but we were worried about him taking out a fence and not only hurting himself, but then having the fence down and letting the other horses out, or you know, pulling the fence down and them getting tangled in the fence. So there's a whole, you know, you can imagine the whole situation happening. So this was semi-successful prior to sending him to me. And so he was managed with a muzzle. I think he was managed with a muzzle, a cradle, and a rug in the extreme times. And she managed to get him to the point where he was in the paddock with a cradle and a rug and maybe one other horse. But then he did relapse really badly, and that resulted in her just sending him to me straight away. Now, my involvement began in March 2015, other than the pre-conversations that I had with the owner about the horse and my recommendations in regards to what to do at home, what we just discussed, you know, the paddock situation, et cetera, et cetera. And I really was the last resort for the horse. So when he got taken off the float, he arrived in a canvas rug. He had a cradle on his neck and he had a muzzle on. So he did look like Hannibal Lecter, and he had bleeding wounds under the rug. So he had severe episodes just prior to coming to my place. This is a picture of him in the paddock. So those of you who don't know what a cradle is, that's that timber thing around his neck. So essentially it's to prevent him from turning around. And you can see the canvas rug is shredded because that's what he would do. He would shred the rug, or he would shred his own body. And he doesn't have a muzzle on in this picture, but he had a muzzle on when he arrived as well. So this is still at the owner's property. That's not at my property. And this is the close-up of the scarring. And so you can see there that there's white scarring, which is quite old. And then you've got, you know, scarring where the hair has grown over. And then you've got scarring where the bare skin is, and then you've got the raw, fresh scarring. So the reason I'm taking you through that explanation is because it indicates that this has been happening for an extended period of time, and it's been severe for an extended period of time. So, and that's just another, obviously that's his shoulder. So everywhere he could reach on his sides, both sides of his body looked like that when he arrived. So my number one priority was his and my or any other horses on the property's safety. And so I couldn't put him in with other horses, and I couldn't put him in normal fencing either, because he would just, once he was in an episode, he was blind, he would run into things. So I couldn't put him in electric fencing. I couldn't put him in plain wire fencing, because I couldn't put him in anything that would break. So I put him in my arena, which was fairly safely fenced. It was cattle panels, so panels, and so they were quite tall. And obviously, you know, if he had hit them, they weren't going to fall over. He wasn't going to escape or anything like that, and they weren't going to break, so he could go through them. So it was as safe as I was going to get without being able to put him in a padded cell. It was sort of like the kind of fencing, I guess a cattle panel, if he knocks into it, he's got a better chance of sort of bouncing off that rather than going through it and really hurting himself. I did have my calm, happy gelding herd nearby in a paddock, and they could go in and out of his view, but they tended to sort of be in his view. And the first thing that I did was clear my schedule and set up a viewing area on my patio or my front patio, which was about 30 meters, within about 30 meters of the arena, maybe a little bit further. So my initial plan was what I call intervention training, and I basically sat nearby watching him for all daylight hours for the first week. So I can't stress that enough. I wasn't in my house, whatever, and on the couch and just looking out the window. I was literally sat on a chair on my patio facing the arena. And I was behind, like my patio had like plants and stuff on it. So I was behind plants. So, I mean, he would have known I was there, but it wasn't, I wasn't like sitting right by the arena. So he sort of couldn't see me. He probably sensed me, but he couldn't see me there. So I'm going to say he didn't get a lot of comfort from my presence. That's why I'm trying to explain that, because it wasn't like I was sitting somewhere where he could see me to prevent him from doing the behavior. I was sitting somewhere where I could see him do it, and then I could go and intervene. And I was sat there with my laptop, so I was working, but I was facing him, in all daylight hours. So that was my number one thing, was his safety. And my training approach was intervention training, doing a colt start on him, so starting him under saddle, building trust. So my idea was that I would become the source of comfort for him, and then I would teach him that he could redirect the thought and essentially self-soothe. Environmental enrichment, so he had other things to stimulate himself, and nutritional support. So intervention, initially I left the preventative equipment on. So that was the muzzle, the cradle, and the rug, and I observed him from that distance. And each time he started an episode, I would intervene by going into the arena, putting his halter on, and doing a training session. And I did that all day for the first week. And I did it, I think on the first day, I probably went into that arena over 20 times. So I wasn't, I've got to stress here that I wasn't going in there and telling him he was wrong for doing the behavior. I literally walked in there and pretended like I was just going to catch him like it was a normal day. I didn't chase him or punish him or anything. I just got the halter on as quickly as I could for his safety and mine. And then I would take the muzzle off, take the cradle off, take the rug off, and then I would do a training session, and then I would put it all back on and let him go. And so the first day I would literally do maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then I would take it all off, because this is the foundation of what I call intervention training. And I've done this with separation anxiety. Obviously, this case is self-mutilation. I've done it with other stereotypic behaviours. And so that the core foundation is just to interrupt the thought and then, or interrupt the behavior and redirect the thought, rather than focusing on just telling him he's wrong for having the thought. You've got to show him what else to do. So I was consistent with my approach and my training methodology, which was based around interaction, play, and curiosity. But I followed the plan of cult starting. So the whole point of him being there was obviously to stop the self-mutilation, but it was to get him started under saddle. So I was doing, you know, my bends, responding to the rein, and then I was doing responses to the leg, and I was doing all the normal training that I would do with a normal colt starting horse. I was also consistent in my expectations, so I treated him the same as a normal horse and as I would with any horse. That doesn't mean that I had an expectation of the time limit, because sometimes trauma causes horses to have cognitive deficiencies, which means that they learn slower than regular horses that haven't had trauma. And so with any horse, I don't expect them to know this within one session, know this within 5 sessions, know this within 10 sessions. I don't mean consistent in those expectations. I don't have a timeline, but I was consistent in my expectations that I was still doing all of the elements of the colt start, irrespective of that he was, a self-mutilator. So, for example, when I teach the bend or the response to the rein, I didn't not do that because I didn't want to bring his nose towards his shoulder. I still did that, even though there was a risk that it would trigger him to go, oh, my nose is at my shoulder, I'm going to bite it. I still did that because it was a necessary thing. So I just treated him like any other colt starting horse that was there. And I was very predictable. So I had to become the source of comfort. So I was very predictable in my training approach. So I just stuck to the plan. It was the same. I didn't change my training style or my methodology. It was always the same. So to note, I initially put a halter on him for his and my safety, but with intervention training, I do prefer to use liberty, and I did build to that. So initially I put the halter on, do the training session, but when I do the intervention work around the behavior, eventually what it looks like is that the horse is doing the behavior. I walk into the arena, I get the horse's attention. I do maybe a couple of things at liberty. I ask for a hindquarter yield. I ask for a draw. I might ask for a backup, something like that. And then I walk out. So the intervention training is simply to intervene when the horse is having the behavior. And then I get out, because that's how I eventually teach the horse to self-soothe. So I just become that little like, hey, you don't need to do that. Hey, you don't need to do that. But then if I was going to do a training session around the colt start, then I would do that separately. So I hope that's making sense in regards to that. In fact, I might just come out and just check on you guys and make sure, if you guys can give me a little thumbs up again, make sure we're all still, audio's good, visual's good, the screen is fine. I love these little emojis. Cool. Excellent. Awesome. Let's get back. Okay, let's go. Okay, so training sessions were built around curiosity, engagement, and the behavior was ignored. Like I said, I never once told him he was wrong for doing the behavior. I didn't get in there and I was never angry myself about the behavior. I didn't get in there and spank him or try and punish him for the behavior. I just walked in as if nothing was happening, got his attention, got the halter on, and started a training session to redirect his thought process. So a lot of people might be thinking, they might be predisposed to thinking, oh, isn't that teaching him that the behavior is going to get your attention? And that kind of, no, the quick answer to that is absolutely not. He's already was doing the behavior without any intervention, like without people giving him attention for it at all. So no, that's not going to be the problem. And really the way that I look at it, it's kind of like what I'm trying to do is redirect the thought so I can say to him, oh, hey, you don't need to do that. Why don't you do this? So it's kind of like you're helping them replace the behavior, but ultimately you're the bridge. And ultimately you want to remove the bridge, and so they don't feel like they need to do the behavior at all. So I followed my standard cult starting program from the ground up, like I said. So the cult starting part of it was each training session was centered around normal cult starting. So, response to the rein, response to the leg, understanding the forward cues. So walk, trot, and canter online, both directions, sideways, back up, yielding the shoulders, yielding the hindquarters, being exposed to the saddle pad, being exposed to the saddle, putting the saddle on, putting the girth on, etc., etc. So it was just all the normal things that I do as part of a cult start, which is pretty comprehensive. And this was for two reasons. One, it's not enough to just tell a horse to stop doing something. I want to direct his thoughts towards something else. So you guys, if you guys are all listening at home, if I say to you, don't think about a pink elephant, don't think about a pink elephant, don't think about a pink elephant, then you're going to be thinking, most of you at home right now are thinking about a pink elephant, because I keep saying pink elephant, and that's all your brain is hearing is pink elephant, not the part where I'm saying don't think about a pink elephant. But if I say to you, think about a yellow canary, 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 you're thinking about a yellow canary, because now I'm directing your brain to something. So this is a principle I follow in my normal day-to-day training anyway. You can't tell a horse not to do something, or a dog. You have to tell them what to do. So you just focus on the behavior that you want and don't worry about the behavior that you don't want. So secondly, I felt that getting him started under saddle would facilitate a lot of learning and a lot of engagement. There's a lot in it for me. Different colt starters are different. So, it's not necessarily, send him to get, it wasn't a case of break him in and break him and he'll knuckle down. That wasn't it at all. It was more the, he's in the paddock, self-mutilating, let's go ahead and teach him all these really cool things so we stimulate his mind with engagement and training. So it wasn't at all the negative sort of connotation around breaking in, and obviously that's why I call it colt starting, even though colt starting applies to males and females. It's an American term. I use that term because I like the term starting them under saddle. It's just the exposure. So I felt that getting him started under saddle would facilitate a lot of learning, a lot of engagement, along with the bonus of then him being able to be taken out, ridden on trails, and the engagement remaining, at home. It was going to facilitate a lot more engagement in his day-to-day life, a lot more stuff. So the trust building that I did was I made sure all my interactions with him were based around conversation. I showed him any tools I was using, like brushes, hoof pick, like I said, the saddle pad, the halter, you name it. He was able to interact with those things, look at those things, and I was having a conversation. I also let him interact with anything that I was using in the arena that didn't directly concern him, like a wheelbarrow when I was in there picking up manure, the rake, whatever. And the reason I say this is because I know that there's a lot of school of thought out of there where it's like, it's none of your business. So a lot of people will actually chase the horses away from, I'm picking up manure, get away, this is none of your business, etc., etc. So that's not my approach at all. I literally wanted him to realize that we were a team, we were working together, and that I was happy to show him and engage with anything that he was interested in. The environmental enrichment and engagement that I also needed to provide, because again, like I was watching him all day, every day, but at night I went to bed and it was dark. And so whilst I knew that we had the, we had the preventative measures on, the preventative measures only stop him from doing the behavior. They cover the symptom, but they don't address the disease. So when you've got the cradle on him and the rug on him, he might not be able to do the behavior, which actually in that photo you could see that he had torn the rug. So he could still really do it. But even if you get the behavior that stops him from doing the equipment that stops him from doing it, it doesn't stop him from wanting or needing to do the thing. So what I wanted to do was provide enough enrichment in his environment that he didn't feel like he needed to do that behavior. So I had my calm, confident, and happy herd nearby at all times. And I thought this was really important. I didn't actually take on any other horses for training at that time because I wanted it to be really stable for him. And so I had my own herd who I knew were going to be calm and all the rest of it. Only myself and my husband, Phil, were on the property. And I did all the training and interacting with him. It was only in the later time that even Phil, that I would say to Phil, look, can you throw him some hay or whatever? So I was like the number one thing that he, that interacted with him. But Phil was on the property, so he'd be, mowing the lawn or, outside, riding his own horses, doing his own thing, leaving to go to work, coming home, all of that sort of stuff. So he saw Phil, and Phil would certainly, he didn't avoid the area or anything. He'd come and talk to me at the fence while I was working with him or whatever, but it was only us two, and I was the only constant that was actually working with him, putting hands on him until later on. And then Phil came in. He might have rugged him for me and stuff like that if I had to go elsewhere. I set up variable feeding position stations in the arena with 3 different slow feeder hay nets, and I had a ball in there, and I think I had a couple of, like, maybe a tarpaulin or something like that. So, a couple of poles on the ground, stuff like that as well. Now, the importance of the variable feeding position stations are it replicates the horse's natural grazing and browsing desires. It also, the slow feeder hay nets provided enrichment through seeking behavior and the activation of his upper lip and all of that area, which was a huge part of what he was using, obviously, to bite himself, was his teeth and his upper lip. So I felt like slow feeder hay nets were going to allow him to be using his mouth and stimulating his mouth and mucking around with his mouth in a positive way and in a way that is normal and natural for horses. And the variable feeding positions allowed for a little bit more seeking behavior. So I would have one hay net high, and so that made him reach up. I had one a little lower but quite loose, and so it moved around a lot, so we had to sort of figure that out. So it's really like a puzzle for him to work out. And I had those full, pretty much all the time. And I had them, I had different types of hay. So I had, like grassy hay in one and maybe some lucerne in another one and things like that, because that's what I felt would really enrich him. Obviously, being in a paddock, just being able to eat grass wasn't enough for him to feel that stimulation. So I felt like the slow feeder hay nets were a way to get him, obviously he wanted to eat. So it was a way to get him to, I guess, mentally and physically work a little bit harder to get that food, but in a way that was quite natural for horses. Daily passive enrichment and company with me. So on the veranda, he couldn't really see me. So, and the plan there was that he couldn't see me, so I could observe him while he was just on his own, and he spent lots of time on his own. But I also spent passive time in the arena where I would go around picking up manure or weeding or, just walking around the arena, or I would just sit in the arena. So I spent downtime with him along with the sessions. So I was company for him, but it also, I didn't want to create that he was reliant on that company. The nutritional support that I gave him was that he was fed on the diet that was set down by the herbalist. And I've just explained, I wanted to replicate the seeking, grazing, and browsing behavior for enrichment. The hay nets were there. He was also getting small hard feeds several times a day that were nutritionally supportive, and with the recipe of the herbalist, etc. And he was getting hay on the ground during the day as well. So self-soothing was the goal, right? So the 2 main goals of the training was for him to be able to self-soothe when he was triggered, without the need of intervention from humans. And the secondary goal was for him to be started under saddle. Training sessions were completely interactive and had a strong play and curiosity element. I wanted to make sure he was willingly interested and not being forced to train. Again, with a trauma horse, well, I don't train any horses. All of my training with horses is interactive and creating willing interest. But with a trauma horse, forcing them to train is just another trigger for them. So you're actually making them need to do the behavior more rather than less. So you really have to create ways to be stimulating and interesting to them. So each training session I was guided by him and what he was showing as an interest. So if he showed disinterest in something that we were doing, I would try something else. Obviously, I had the ability to do that because with colt starting, there's so many things that you have to teach the horses. So it was really easy. If I saw that he was sort of flat or disinterested or distracted, I would just go on to something else to maybe encourage a little bit more interaction, and also to show him that there was a little bit of choice available to him. I basically sat and watched him all day. Every time he started to self-mutilate, I would go into the arena, put the halter on, which I've explained to you already. And once it was safe to do so, I did the interruption at liberty. I had the plan to start him at under saddle, which gave me the exercises that I was doing with him. And I was just using them as what to do when he wanted to self-mutilate. The first few days, I kept the rug on him, and I only put the cradle on him at night when I couldn't watch him. And I had to interrupt the behavior multiple times within the hour, some hours, and then others it was perhaps only once an hour or so. So, yeah, I think the first day I took the muzzle off him because I wanted the interaction with his mouth to be with the slow feeder hay nets and things like that. But the first day, I think I had the cradle on him, and then I really wanted to get that off him as soon as possible as well. And then I think it was 3 days, and I was able, oh yeah, here we go, training outcome. So within 3 days, he was able to go naked during the day. And that was still with me watching him, and he would still start the behavior. I would interrupt the behavior, and every day that got less and less. And within a week, I think it was between 7 and 10 days, he was able to go naked during the days, and then the nights were around that 10, probably 10 to 14 days. I trusted him without the rug on at night. And so I only trusted him without the rug at night when I knew that he had gone like a full day without doing it, with me watching him. So I hope that's making sense. I was still watching him all the time. Day one, I had to interrupt like 30 times. The next day it was less. Day two, I had the rug on still. Day three, I took the rug off, but I was still watching him and interrupting. Day four, the rug was still off and I was still interrupting him and still watching. So I was there all the time. And I think it was maybe day 5 or 6 that maybe he had, it had reduced significantly where the behavior was not only he didn't do it as many times, and I mean significantly. Like, as I said, the first day I had to interrupt him like 20, maybe 30 times. And then by day 4, it was, maybe like once or twice in the morning and then once in the afternoon or something like that. It was really, really significantly reduced. He was successfully started under saddle, confident and happy, and there was no reoccurrence of behaviours or need for intervention after 2 weeks. So by the time I got to the 14-day mark at my place, he was no longer doing the behaviour. And then I waited that 3 weeks to make sure that he was not going to do the behavior. I was confident he was able to self-soothe. He was able to not need to do the behavior. And after 5 weeks, I sent him home. So here he is. I'm out on the trail with him. This is probably, week 3 or something like that. You can see that I've got my 4 dogs on the trail with me, which is what I used to do with all my colts. Like I said, even though even though he was a trauma horse, I wasn't going to train him any differently, because my way of training was to make him confident with the environment. It wasn't about hiding things from him. It was about making him confident with the environment. So he then got sent home, and the owner wasn't able to fully adhere to my recommendations in regards to his training program or his environment. He was put in a fairly small paddock without being in a herd. And he was unfortunately in between mares and stallions. So his paddock was like, the stallions were on one side of the driveway, his paddock was on the other side of the driveway, and then there was a laneway, and then there were mares on the other side of that. So they weren't like all nose to nose or anything like that, but there was still sort of, you know, that environment that he could, and he did relapse after a short period of time. So I did visit him after that, and I took him like out on trails and things like that to try and intervene while he was there. And the behavior was significantly reduced. It wasn't as bad. It didn't last as long, but he was still, you know, doing the behavior. And then so the owner made the decision to relocate him. Because she just felt like there's no way that he was going to be able to be rehabilitated fully at her place. So so March he was with me. April, I think about May, he got sent to my friend who put him in a herd. There was no breeding on site. So it was a mixed herd of geldings and mares, but there were no stallions on site. And her young daughter ended up falling in love with him and took him on. And they spent several years together learning and growing with very minimal episodes, as in once or twice a year when a severe trigger happened. And that would usually be a new horse arriving onto the property. And even then he was able to pull himself out of it. So she would see him do it in the paddock, like, you know, a new float would arrive, a horse would be unloaded, he would trigger, he would do it, and then he would snap himself out of it. So, you know, that was fantastic. And he was then sold to a young woman who does classical dressage, loves him, and as far as I know, hasn't had any issues at all. So and to clarify that, she took him on in, say, June 2015. By probably 2017, 2018, he wasn't getting triggered even at all. Like, I'll show you the photos. So this is his herd. So that's human kids. So this was his new home. So that's him on the far left-hand side. And that's two mares that was in the paddock, but there were other horses. They're just not in the photo. And there were 3 human kids. So this is in June. So this is really soon after he got started. So as you can see, there's a little boy here and, you know, a little pony. And he was just treated like a normal horse. He was just interacted with normally. Again, you know, my friend that took him on didn't treat him any differently, didn't treat him like a special basket case or anything like that. She put him in the herd, and, you know, she just caught him and you know, rode him and things like that. But as I said, the triggers, as soon as there weren't the breeding behaviors and everything happening around him, the triggers were like basically non-existent for a couple of years, and then they literally disappeared. So he didn't. So this is the young girl, the daughter. So she was quite young when she just adored him, fell in love with him. So that photo was taken in June 2015. This one was in June 2015. You can see the football there. So the boys have been playing footy, and the young girl's just been out riding him in the paddock. And here he is still in June, and that's at our local arena. So again, they still took him out to a local arena and rode him around and things like that. This is October 2016, so a full 18 months later, and they took him out to a cowboy dressage clinic with us. It was a 2-day clinic, and he was a little anxious on the first day. So this was the first time he was away from home and surrounded by lots of strange horses. So it was, you know, what's going to happen here kind of thing. But he was a little anxious on the first day, no sign of the behavior, and he was calm on the second day. So that when I say a little anxious, the same level of anxiety as a normal horse at a clinic, if it's their first time at a clinic, etc., etc. This is November 2018, so 2 years later, and again at a clinic with multiple horses. You can see here he's got absolutely no scarring on his body. He's just a happy, healthy happy guy. And he, again, there was no behaviours, no anxiety at all at this clinic. This is my clinic. That's why I know. And this is November 2020. So he's just being ridden around there by mum, the girl's mum. And yeah, happy, healthy guy. She trains in classical dressage, and was interested, and horsemanship, and is interested in the classical. When I say classical dressage, I don't mean competitive dressage as in what we see at the Olympics or at our local shows and stuff like that. I mean the classical training. So yeah, that was him at home. And then he was sold within that fraternity to another lady who does classical dressage with him. And I have seen photos of him. I don't have permission to share them. I didn't ask for permission to share them. I thought that was fine. So I've seen photos of him over the year, and he remains happy and healthy. So as far as I'm concerned, pretty much, or not pretty much, the horse is fully rehabilitated. For those of you that were asking, the trauma course that I did, now the trauma course that I did was this year. I'm only saying it because I've had lots of people ask me what the course was. So it was set out by Understand Horses, and it was a trauma enforced trainer course. And this slideshow that I've been showing you is a variation on the case study. The case study that I had to present also included other elements which I didn't share with you guys because it was just on the on the school side of things, on the academic side of things. So these are my two books, and what I wanted to share with you was, if you guys are interested in knowing more about any of the things that I've spoken about, the one on the right, the yellow book, has a lot of information about horses, the way that they learn. One of the stories in the back of this book is about the catalyst, is about that horse. In the book, he's referred to as Lemonade. His paddock name was Soda Pop, so I used Lemonade as an alias. So yeah, he's referred to in that book. I think there's maybe 4 stories in there of horses that I've helped over the years, but the whole front of the book is information about how horses learn, the difference between domestic and wild horses, what their intrinsic nature is. That's why it's called enlightenment, because it does have a lot of that information where, when we realize how different horses are from human beings and how different they are from dogs, we realize that we really do have to interact with them in a different way. And then the one on the left, the green one, that's my latest book. It's called Movement, and that has a lot of exercises in it. It's got chapters on variable feeding positions, which I referenced in this in the seminar, and it's got a lot of background about the variable feeding positions and all that sort of stuff. So I've got another book as well, a purple one, which you're welcome to buy as well. But if you're interested in what I've been talking about, these are the 2 books that you want to get your hands on, and they are available at horsemanshipperformance.com, and they are on special for the next 24 hours. So I've removed the postage cost for the next 24 hours, and they're available on my website. You will get a link, I think, in your email when I conclude this webinar. Now, I do have time for probably a few questions, so I'm going to turn off this screen share, and that should bring me back. Stop sharing. Okay, so that should bring me back to here. So great, we're only at an hour. We totally have time for questions. So let me pop into the chat, the Q&A box. Skin parasites. Okay, so sorry if this has been already explained, but was a physical cause such as skin parasites investigated prior to the decision that this was purely behavioral, thinking about dogs due to skin parasites? Yes. So yes, there was veterinary intervention. I know that there was veterinary intervention when the horse was returned from the lease home. So I know definitely that there was a veterinary consult in regards to the behavior, and there was a full workup done, bloods and all of that sort of stuff. So that would have been ruled out then. I would almost hesitate. I would assume, I don't like to make assumptions, but the horse was at you saw the photo, he was at a show home. So, that horse would have been, cleaned all the time, all of that sort of stuff, which could lend itself to maybe thinking maybe shampoos and stuff were a little bit triggering. But because the behavior continued when he went home and then he was, put in the paddock and things like that, then no, I would say, and then the vet intervened as well. So I would say no, there was, I would say yes, parasites were eliminated as a potential cause. Were there any suspected physical health issues that were ruled out before his owners asked for help? Yeah, so absolutely. There was veterinary intervention and consult. That's what resulted in the horse being gelded, but there was other, there were bloods taken. There was all sorts of, there was a whole, that's why it took. So he was returned to the owner in 2014 and he did not come to me until 2015. So she put, 12 months of veterinary, herbalist, naturopath, you name it, Googling, finding research papers, blah, 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 you name it. And she tried to fix it at home. He's a very, very well-bred stallion worth an absolute, considerable amount of money. And so no expense was spared in trying to, veterinary medicinally intervene on the horse for sure. Hi, Tanya, did you treat him for ulcers? Yes, in the herbal mixture, there was treatment for ulcers within the herbal mixture. And from memory, I believe he was actually on a veterinary course of omeprazole as well prior to my coming to me. I think that was one of the things that they did. Do you think the stifle operation caused any stress? I can't say it did, and I'm going to say no because the owner, when she said he was operated on as a 12-month-old, she said the recovery was good and he was still happy and healthy for a full 12 months after that. So the operation happened when he was 12 months old. When he was 2 years old, he got sent away for training. The behavior didn't develop until we can't be sure, but and he was sent home in 2014. So you've got to think that maybe the behavior, a trickle of the behavior maybe started in 2012, 2013. And then when they started rugging him, he was rugged with normal cotton rugs because show horses are, but they had started rugging him with canvas rugs and things like that to prevent the behavior. So I'm going to say the stifle injury probably, the stifle operation itself probably caused stress in as much as any operation on a 12-month-old horse would cause stress. They get taken either away from their home. I'm not sure whether she took him to the vet or whether the vet brought the stuff. I think he was taken to the vet. So obviously there's an element of stress involved there, but he fully recovered and there was no signs of any problem, prior to him leaving. When you entered the yard, did he stop the behavior straight away to raise his head, or did you have to break his? I had to break his concentration initially in the early stages on day one or whatever. I had to, clap my hands. I had to twirl the rope. I had to do all sorts of things to try and get ahead, get snapping out of it to put the halter on. Because as I said, when he was in a full blown episode, he would crash into fences and things like that. So he absolutely, now that was the other reason I was sitting on my veranda, because those first few days I literally would be on my laptop working and I would see the start, and it would start, I'm not going to say it would start slow, but it would build. So you would see him sort of, get a hold of himself and maybe do a few bites, and I would start making my way to the arena. And hopefully sometimes I would get there in time and he was still just biting, and then it would escalate to him actually holding himself and then doing the spinning. So once he got into the spinning situation, yeah, I had to be pretty dramatic in terms of my trying to get his attention. My horse is by a show Arab and will rip rugs. It seems to be fun. He appears to like to tear them. He bites his knee when I'm picking out the front feet. What would you suggest to redirect his thinking when he does this? Yeah, it can become definitely. So there's a lot in this question. So firstly, I've got a horse that has suffered trauma, and I know this. I got her as like a half rescue situation, and she has suffered trauma and was in a little bit of a show preppy situation. And I know that her training was pretty old school, and I'm going to say abusive old school. So, you can picture that. And I know that she was rugged. And when I first showed the rug to that horse, she went into a full freeze state. And it has taken multiple sessions on my part to get her confident with the rug. And one of the things that she did when she wasn't confident with the rug was she tried to pull it off herself. So I actually trained her by putting it on and without doing it up. And I worked a lot at Liberty. And this is the short version of what I've done, because it's literally taken multiple sessions and days. And I was happy to do that because I'm starting her under saddle. And so for me, if she can't even confidently wear a rug, then there's no way she's going to confidently wear a saddle, let alone a human. So I was happy to do that. And I wanted to do short confidence building sessions. But one of the first things she did was actually try and pull it off her body. And one of the things I wanted to do was make sure she had reached the point where she was confident. And for me, the indicator of her being confident was her not trying to pull it off her body, because I knew that once I did it up, that she, one, wouldn't be able to pull it off her body. And so her attempts to do so would either result in her getting extremely stressed and trying to really pull it, and then potentially panicking and realizing that she couldn't get it off, and then maybe bolting or something like that. So the first thing I'm going to say is, and I don't know what your horse's circumstances are, and you might be thinking, he's been wearing a rug for 5 years, like he's not worried by it, but I would still have that as a consideration. I literally saw not that long ago a horse that's been wearing a rug for like 3 years, and I watched him canter around the paddock. He was playing with a paddock mate, and all of a sudden he started bucking and really violently kicking. And I said, I was actually teaching a clinic, and I said to the people, you look at that horse is worried about that rug, and he's been wearing that rug for months. And so it's just because we've got it on them and they've been wearing it for a long time doesn't actually mean that they're 100% confident with it. So that would be an avenue to explore. As for redirecting the behavior, you can really do anything to redirect the behavior. I would want to build confidence with him actually with the foot picking up, because if he's biting his knee while you're picking his feet up, that could indicate that he's got a little bit of, concern there. And I don't like using certain words are going to, again, make people go, oh, he's not concerned, he's not worried. So let's say concern, let's say worry. Let's say he just doesn't love it. So I'm going to talk about maybe developing a little bit more confidence around picking his feet up, getting him to actually pick them up and hold them up, teaching him to do that rather than me picking them up. Or you can just it's hard to, obviously, if you've got the foot picked up to redirect the behavior, you could maybe just hold, reach underneath and like scratch his muzzle or something like that. And maybe do something like that to interact, to sort of say, oh, okay, I can see that you're doing this. Let me finish this. And then you could maybe do a lateral bend, or, stick your finger in his mouth to teach him how to be wormed or something like that. Like just anything to redirect the thought. Or if you're ready to start working him, if you're picking out his feet because you're going to ride him or something like that, you could probably pick out his foot and then maybe ask him to just, do a hindquarter yield, or it really can be anything. It's just got to be something other than saying no, because when you say no, it's like the pink elephant. You're just saying, don't bite your knee. And he's going, bite your knee, bite your knee, bite your knee. You've got to say, do this. And he'll go, oh, do that. Like he'll just get redirected. So I hope that helped. Are you available for phone consults? I have a 7-year-old standing gelding who does this on a lesser scale, and we're working through ruling out physical stuff. So you can send me a message. You can send me a private message, connect with me. Like I said, you should get an email which will have either my email address in it, or you can find me on Facebook and send me a private message. And I can either work out maybe to do a Zoom or something with you. Or you could send me an email with a detailed description. I'm happy to discuss it with you. Yeah, for sure. I'm really, that'd be great. Do you think this approach would, this is a really great question. Do you think this approach would work for cribbing or wind sucking? So one of my goals is actually to do a little bit of a study on, I'm really interested in stereotypic behaviors. So self-mutilation is an extreme version of stereotypic behavior, but lesser situations of stereotypic behaviors are weaving, wind sucking, pacing, things like that. And I'm actually really interested in doing a bit of a case study on some wind sucking, because I believe it would work, yes, but I don't know that to be true because I haven't done it yet. And it is something that I'm interested in doing. I don't have any wind suckers here. But it is something I'm definitely interested in, and something that I will eventually set up where I will get a wind sucker and see if I can help reduce the behavior, because obviously that's a really significant stereotypic behavior that can last a really long time. And I know there's all sorts of things that we can do for it. And again, the things that we do for it don't prevent the horse from wanting to do it. So I'm really interested in trying to get the horse to not want to do it, rather than putting a collar on or electrifying everything and things like that. So yes, I think it would work is the easy answer. But no, I don't have any evidence to support that. Sorry about the rug, as he does that reach around and bite behavior, but he doesn't care about the rug. It's biting his knee, I'm concerned. Yeah. So definitely, definitely interact with his muscle when he's biting his knee. And, what we have to understand is that horses most vulnerable position is when they're laying down, and one of the other most vulnerable positions when they've got their feet picked up. So many horses are very protective of their legs, and Arabs in particular are very, very protective of their legs. I've had Arabs drop down to their knees when I've touched their legs. I've had Arabs do all sorts of things to protect their legs. And so he might be like, oh, I know you want to pick up my foot, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to behave and I'm going to be obedient, but I'm still not really confident with my foot being off the ground, because it makes me nervous because I've got my foot off the ground. So yeah, it's definitely worth interacting with his muzzle is going to be the first step in you saying to him, oh, I can see that you're a little bit worried about this. And then hopefully, it's important to do the replacement behavior, the interruption. It's important to do it with a really open heart and a really, I don't want you to go, I'm going to hindquarter yield you to stop you from doing that. It's not a punishment. You're not doing the thing as a punishment. You're doing the thing to say, hey, look over here. Why don't we look at this? And it's not even, I don't even want you going, you're all right. Like, it's really important that we are like, oh, I'm not even seeing that, but we're just going to do this. Because that's what makes the horse feel okay about following that. If you're punishing him, and I'm not saying I don't even know who you are. I'm not saying that you would punish him, but I'm just trying to make sure that everyone understands. If you punish them for the behavior, you're just making them feel bad about a behavior that they really don't want to do it anyway. It's kind of like a person chewing their nails or whatever. Like, it's just, it ends up being one of those things. So, and it comes from a concern place. So I hope that helps. Okay, that's the last question. So I'm going to give you guys like a couple of minutes, and you can ask any other questions. Otherwise, we're gonna stitch it up. So I really hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you. I hope it worked really well. This is my first webinar, and I really enjoy them. So yeah, I enjoy going live and talking about stuff. I used to do my Wednesday night live show. So this is probably something that we might do on a regular basis. Maybe monthly we'll do a webinar, pick a topic. So by all means, you know, send me some topics. If you, obviously I did this for free because I want to get the information out there. If you want to support me, go, the best way to support me is to go and buy one of those books. As I said, they're on discount for the next 24 hours with free postage. If you're not a reader, buy it for someone else. That's just a way that you can support me if you found value in the webinar. But yeah, thanks very much. And let me just check. Oh, a couple more. Thank you. In the past, stereotypic behaviors have been thought to be related to adrenaline endomorphic releases that the horse gets addicted to the behavior. Biting joints can be indicative of arthritis. Okay, yes. So yes, that's a really good point. The horse biting on his knee could be an indicator that there's like there's a soreness there. So that's definitely something that could be explored as well. And yes, absolutely. Some of the research and theory out there is that the stereotypic behaviors are releasing chemicals that make the horses feel good, and that's why they're pursuing that stereotypic behavior. Other information out there is that it is soothing to the horse. So, and I think all of these, I think it's all of these things, right? You know, I think some horses begin as an anxiety, like an anxious behavior, and then it turns into maybe an endorphin release. It turns into a chemical soothing, and so that's why they continue to do it. Definitely crib biting, you know, that's what they say. Crib biting is like they get the addiction to it. So yeah, I 100% am on board with it being that. I think sometimes it is just a coping mechanism. It's like a pacifying action. I think sometimes it just becomes, you know, like with soda or like with the catalyst, it didn't appear to soothe him. It didn't, like, you know, when you look at a crib biter, for example, and they're in the zone, like they get into that real, like they almost look doped out, right? Some of them are in that real doped out zone of like, and that to me would be an indicator of like, yeah, he's getting a chemical injection for that behavior. But I think if you look at a horse that's got stereotypic behavior and that's not the case, it's not one, resulting in soothing, and two, it's not actually got the appearance of them getting that release, then I think maybe that's not the case. But again, I'm not a vet. The research is continuing to be done, which is fantastic. It's definitely an area that interests me. I really feel like things like they can all sort of be traced back and stemmed to us taking the horse to an extreme version of a synthetic environment. And so what I mean by that is that the 4 cases of self-mutilation that I spoke about, you know, my one and the other, you know, 3 people that commented, all of those horses were stallions kept in isolation. So, you know, horses are herd animal, whether it's a stallion or not. But you know, the stallions have got all of that desire to breed, and so it's exacerbating the issue. And so I think that, and to me, that's like it's like a battery hen. So it's like an extreme version. You know, we put a horse in a round pen or we put a horse in a stable and we don't realize, you know, and that's why obviously in stable areas you can walk down the barn aisle of horses that have been stabled for a long time, and they're, you know, they're weaving and they're wind sucking and they're digging holes in the corner and they're doing stuff like that because you know, it's literally driving them up the wall. It's literally, you know, and so I think some of them find wind sucking and that might release dopamine and that gives them the soothe, and then others are still just weaving and they're, you know, they're still, I think they're literally just moving to try and move their body. Yeah. So would you vary the action of intervention so you don't create another habit, or would you do the same thing so the horse makes a connection and understands the pattern as intervention? I'm not sure I understand the question. Would you vary the action of the intervention? So the intervention, I think maybe you're saying the training, maybe. Would you vary the action of the intervention? So for me, the intervention is me going in and stopping the behavior. But so with soda, what it started was me going in and putting a halter on and redirecting the behavior. Then it grew to, like I said, he was still there for cult starting. So I would still train him. And I would also train him when he wasn't doing it. Like, it wasn't like I'm going to sit here and wait for him to do his thing so I can go and train him. I would go, oh, you've had breakfast. Okay, let's get a training session in. Oh, we've finished the training session. Oh, you're doing your thing. I'll come in there and we'll do a little bit more on that training session. So it wasn't just triggered by that. And then the intervention, if you like, again, now we're branching off into two areas, right? So I'm doing the normal cult starting training, and then the intervention is purely to stop the behavior and redirect the behavior. So when I'm only focusing on redirecting the behavior, it builds to liberty. So I'm able to get in there without putting the halter on and just maybe do some hindquarter yields or a draw or you know, a lunge or something like that at liberty to redirect the behavior. Then it becomes me being able to maybe walk up to the fence and just say, hey, you know, and see if I can get his attention, break the thought, and then he goes back to eating grass to break the behavior. And then it becomes like, can I do that from further away and further away? So I think that's what you mean, is that, yeah, it doesn't, like day 1 and day 30 of the intervention don't look the same, in that the goal is for me to have less and less and less influence, where I might be able to sit on the patio and see him look around and go, and then that'll be enough for him to go, oh, I don't need to do that. I'm going to go back to my eating my hay. So I hope that answered your question. Oh, right. Let's say you do a hindquarter yield. Yeah, no, I would do different things. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what training. Yeah, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you do hindquarter yields for 3 days and then sideways for 3 days and then shoulder yields for 3 days and then back up for 3 days. Yeah. Okay, got it. Okay, cool. Well, it's been an hour and 22 minutes, and I told the webinar people, this Zoho, I told them that I was going to be an hour and 45 minutes. So I don't know what happens at the hour and 45 minute mark. I don't know whether they just go, your time's up, you can leave. So thanks so much for coming on board and being interactive, and I hope you got something out of it, and let me know. And please follow me on Facebook and on my Instagram. It's always a big help to have people interacting and stuff like that. So thanks for hanging in till the end, those of you that did. And yeah, I will, I've got your emails because you registered, so I will put you on the list and let you know if I think we'll do one of these a month. So yeah, send some topics through and I'll let you know when they're coming up and what the topics are. So good night, thank you, and hope to see you all out there soon. Bye.